This is my End Time series by Truth Transistor Radio.
The days will come when the great buildings of the cities shall be thrown down, and there will not be left one stone upon another. Do not allow anyone to lead you astray. There will be those who will come in my name, and they will say, I am he, and they will deceive many. When you hear of wars and rumors of wars, do not be alarmed. These things must take place, but this will not yet be the end.
Welcome to part 5 of my End Times study series. And I really wasn't sure where to go next with this, but I decided what I wanted to do is look at different passages about end times and look at the chronology and the wording that is used. And as we go through different books and different places in the Bible, we can see parallels. And we don't want to make assumptions. I don't want to make assumptions, but I will present perhaps the way different views see these things. So that is what we're going to do. And I'm going to start with the Olivet Discourse, which is Matthew 24 and 25. Now, Matthew goes a lot further with this than Mark 13 and Luke 21 does. Also, I thought this is how I would do it. I'm going to write down these things, and in the next video, we'll have it typed out. What I want to do is compare, and perhaps, because these are the same, Mark 13 and Luke 21 is the same message as Matthew 24, but they're worded a little differently. So we're going to see what the differences and similarities are, but I don't believe the Bible contradicts itself. Now, it is possible. I'm using the ESV. So if there is any contradiction, I will have to look at the Greek to see what the problem is. But that's what we're going to do. And as we go, I think after this, I'll look at the book of Revelation. And we will also look at maybe references to end times in there's Second Thessalonians, or First and Second Thessalonians has some references as well. But we're going to look at like Zephaniah, Zechariah, Ezekiel, Isaiah. This may take a long time. I don't know how long this series is going to be, but I really feel like one thing I need to do is get more familiar with Old Testament prophets. And so if it takes 100 videos in this series to do that, I guess that's what we're going to have to do, because I don't want to just look at maybe a few things out of context and make assumptions based upon, because sometimes context changes everything. And sometimes when you learn how the context is given in certain books, that you have one thing that says it happens right before something else, but you didn't see that maybe in something else that you studied or that I've studied. So I've been learning I've been becoming more familiar with Ezekiel, for example, recently. And I've seen some things in there because I'm very familiar with Revelation, or at least the flow of the book and what it says. It doesn't mean I understand it completely. It just means I'm more familiar with it because I've read through Revelation several times. I've read through Daniel several times, not seven, several times. I'm familiar with those. I'm familiar with the Olivet Discourse, but we're going to start with this. But then when I was looking at Ezekiel, I realized there are some references. And in this previous video of Mystery Babylon, the woman that rides the beast, I was showing you how the Bible defines itself. And maybe you disagree with my conclusion on that. That's fine. But I'm going to try to be fair and say how would different perspectives view these things. So let's start with Matthew 24 going into 25. And let's see here. I want to share the entire screen. Okay. Matthew 24. Now, so Jesus, starting verse 1, Jesus left the temple and was going away when his disciples came to point out to him the buildings of the temple. But he answered them, "You see all these things, do you not? Truly I say to you, there will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down." And he sat on the mountain of Olives. The disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us, when will these things be, and what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age?" Now, I want to point out that this could be one question referring to one event. It could be referring to two events or three events. Now, Jesus does not clarify the difference, if there is any, but look at the questions they ask. Tell us, when will these things be? That's question number one. Now, it's not split up this way, but it could be understood as different things that happen at different times. What are they referring to? The temple being destroyed, right? In verse 1 and 2, when Jesus said all these things will be destroyed and be thrown down. What will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? Now, my cousin, who is post-millennial, he believes that there was a first century Great Tribulation, believes, he keeps telling me to talk about or to study this age and the age to come. So this is part of the question. What is the end of the age? You know, depending on your view, is it the end of the age of Israel? Is it the end of the age of of the world before Christ returns? What is the end of the age? So, I'm open on this. I believe in a future Great Tribulation. I believe that the end of the age is when Christ returns. That's my perspective. But we'll see. Anyway, I don't want to make any assumptions. I'm just kind of thinking through this. So let's keep going. And Jesus answered them, "See that no one leads you astray. For many will come in my name, saying, 'I am the Christ,' and they will lead many astray." Many will say, "I am Christ." So I want to write these down because it's faster than typing, and will lead astray. Now, in the first century, I'm sure that was happening. In fact, in the book of Acts, Paul talked about people that said they were of Christ, but they really were wolves in sheep's clothing. Or in Revelation, there's the church that says they're Jews, but they're not. They're of Satan or whatever. There were probably people that proclaimed that Jesus was the Messiah, but they were teaching false doctrines. They weren't really followers of Christ. Maybe they were using Jesus for their own gain. Who knows? So that is true in the first century. So there are people that believe in a first century fulfillment, and I will say that was happening. But I will also say that has been happening for 2,000 years. There have been people proclaiming Christ, and I don't know if this means they're saying that they are Christ, like somebody that says they are Jesus, they are the Messiah, or whatever, or if they're saying that Jesus is the Christ, but they are false Christians. So they're still proclaiming Jesus. But I don't know. It could be seen either way there. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but the end is not yet. Now, this is one of those things. Let's see. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars. Oh, wait. See that you are not alarmed, for this must take place, but the end is not yet. Wars and rumors of wars, and end is not yet. So I think that perhaps throughout history, there have always been wars and rumors of wars. I do think that there's been an increase of it in recent years. But again, is Jesus saying that just because these crazy things happen doesn't mean that's a sign of whatever he's about to answer here, of the questions? And then it says, for nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom, nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom. And there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. Now, this is kind of weird because it's funny, because I still hear people using this to say, see, the end is near. We just had an earthquake. But this has always taken place. However, there's this verse 8, and I wanted to point this out. It says, these are but the beginnings of the birth pains. And so beginning of birth pangs. I'm writing all this down. Now, when we do the next two chapters, I will probably just have to do a check mark next to a lot of these because I've already written it down. Beginning of birth pangs. Now, I heard somebody point this out, and this is kind of how I think of this. Somebody pointed out that in birth pains, they increase as you get closer to the birth. And so is it possible to say that these kinds of things, wars and rumors of wars, nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom, famines and earthquakes, these things will increase as we get closer to the end? Very possible. How does this apply to the first century? Well, we know that there was I don't know how much in the 40 years between Christ and AD 70, there was wars and rumors of wars. I'm sure that there were famines at that time. I'm sure that somewhere there were earthquakes. I'm sure that, perhaps there were battles going on. And I've heard that there were kind of different, sections of Rome that were fighting against each other for power. So that can be applied to that day, right? And perhaps it increased up until 70 AD. I don't know. So those are things to consider. I also heard, if you're going to take this all to be talking about something that will be fulfilled in the future, is that, in fact, I'm going to look this up somewhere and see. I want to see okay. I'm trying to think how to search this, but average, let's see. Have earthquakes gotten bigger over time? Okay. Because I've seen a chart somewhere that shows like some kind of steady increase. Let me see what this is. I don't know if this is time. Let's see. How is earthquake magnitude measured? Okay, that's not what I'm looking for. I've seen this somewhere before where it shows how over the last 50 years, it has exponentially gotten worse. But let's see. Maybe this is it. Let's see. Yeah, let's see. Since 1900, quakes measuring Mag 6 to 6.9 have increased by around 450%, while quakes larger than 6.9 have actually slightly decreased. Larger than 6, interesting. So it's the smaller ones, I guess, that have increased exponentially, it seems like. The bigger ones have stayed the same. And I wonder if it was, let's try something like hurricanes. And I'm just doing this because I don't know where to search for it now, because it's a last minute thing. And I'm just trying to see like all tropical storms. There is kind of this recent increase, but I don't know that it's much bigger, although they all seem to be higher than ever on this chart in recent years. But, this doesn't prove anything. I don't know where I saw something about like, let's try, I don't know, tornadoes. That since the 60s, there's something that has been exponentially bigger, and I'm not sure. You can search this out yourself. What is this here? Tornadoes by year. Now, part of this could be that we actually have tools that were more specifically, we're not missing any compared to way back in 1950. Maybe back then we missed a whole lot. We didn't have quite the tools that we have now. So weak tornadoes, it seems to be increasing, although it's been going down in the last 16 years. So I don't know. I don't know where I saw what I saw, and it was a while ago, but you can search that for yourself. I didn't really prepare for that. I was just curious. But I've heard suggestions that I do remember in a few years ago, there was a bunch of hurricanes that came in through the Gulf of Mexico, or maybe not all that through the Gulf of Mexico, but I know one crossed Puerto Rico, and there was another one, maybe 2 or 3 in the same year that were all like record breaking, or, top 5 of all time, all in the same year. But that's something interesting to research. But I've heard that before on beginning of birth pains. Seems to indicate something that will increase in frequency as it gets closer to the birth or closer to what they're asking about. Verse 9, then they will deliver you up to, let me see if I want to make sure I'm not muted. Okay, I'm not. Okay. Then they will, verse 9, then they will deliver you up to tribulation and put you to death. Okay, deliver to tribulation and put to death. Now, we do know that in the first century, both the Jewish the Jewish leaders were killing Christians, and also soon after that, I don't know exactly when Romans started persecuting Christians, but it was after, obviously, once Christianity started spreading, that the Romans also persecuted Christians, and this has continued for 2,000 years in diverse places. No pun intended. But you could say, if you believe in a first century fulfillment, yes, Christians were put to death and persecuted in the first century. That's absolutely true. We see that in the book of Acts. I will also say that has not stopped, right? So that is both of those things are true. Okay. They'll put you to death, and you will be hated by all nations. Hated by all nations for Christ's sake. Sorry, it won't go this long when I get to the other 2 books, I promise, Mark 13 and Luke 21, because they're parallels, and it won't be for Christ's sake, right? Verse 10, and then many will fall away and betray one another and hate one another. Many fall away betray and hate one another. Now, I'm not here to say, because I think throughout church history, there have been ups and downs on this issue. It does seem like when Christ preached this, the followers of Jesus were still, um, like they weren't under arrest yet. So you could look at it from their perspective and say, if you're going to take a partial preterist view and say all of this happened in the first century that Jesus is referring to, that you could say that, where was I? I forgot what I was looking at. Yeah, you can say that the hardness, there's coming a point in time in, at this point, the Jesus and his disciples were not being arrested yet, but after Jesus was taken to the cross, all his followers started to get persecuted, right? So that would increase for sure at that time. We could also look at recent trends, especially in the West, because the West was a more Christian culture and is becoming less so. Is that what this is referring to? I don't know. I do tend to think if there's a futurist perspective, fulfillment of these things, that there will be a great hardening against Christianity, more so from a global perspective and not just a local perspective. But I'm also want to be fair to those who believe in a first century perspective and say, yes, it is true that the hardness of many grew cold, or the many will fall away and betray one another and hate one another happened in that time. And it got worse, and more Christians were put to death. Many false prophets will arise. And that's still happening today, but I'm pretty sure that was happening in the first century. So I have no doubt that was going on back then. But, it's really prominent now that you have radio and television all over the world. There's these false prophets for money, right? If you really dig into what they're doing, I have a hard time believing that they really believe in God, that they're using God for profit. So not spelled the same way as this prophet, but and because the lawlessness increased, I'm going to have to use the back of this page too. Lawlessness increased. The love of many will grow cold. I think I accidentally quoted this earlier when it talked about many will fall away, betray, and hate one another, which is a similar idea. But anyway, the love of many will grow cold. But the one who endures to the end will be saved. Endures to end will be saved. I'm being very specific here, because as we get into parallel passages, I want to see what parallels pop up. Okay. Now I'm going to keep going, but I'm going to flip the page over here. Now, I do know that Matthew 24 is the longest of all of these as well. So there's more details in these, but maybe I'm not as familiar with the other two. Okay, where was I? But verse 14, and this gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. So gospel, to me, okay, well, let me write this first. Gospel of kingdom proclaimed to all nations, and then the end will come. Okay, now, for those who believe in a first century fulfillment, I've heard two things. Number one, I've heard that that the gospel reached the whole known world of the Roman Empire. So when they see the word world, they're thinking Roman Empire. Or I've also heard some that say that the gospel did reach the entire world, and we just don't have it written in scripture, which is possible. Let me just say how that's possible. In the book of Acts, and I'm not going to look it up now, but you can search for it. But there's a story about a teacher of God who was, I don't remember if he was going somewhere, like where he was going and where he went, but I believe it's a story where he was speaking to an Ethiopian eunuch, and he preached to this Ethiopian eunuch, and the Ethiopian got saved. And whoever this was disappeared and appeared in a different nation just immediately, or in a different city somewhere. He was like transported miraculously by God. So if that could happen, then is it possible that God was bringing the gospel to all nations all over the world in some means, whether it was some follower of Christ that God moved supernaturally to other nations, or an angel that was revealing the gospel to all nations? I don't know. But that is something that would have to be guessed. Most that take a partial preterist view, that believe all of this was fulfilled in the first century, would say that it was the Roman Empire. But I just wanted to add that some believe, yes, it did reach every tribe, tongue, and nation in the whole world before 70 AD. If you're going to take what we know in history, if you look at a chart of reached nations throughout history, in the 20th century is really when you start to, let me see if I'm going to search. I'm just going to do this live here just for fun. Reached nations of the gospel over time. I just want to see if there's like a chart that shows, because I saw this when I was in high school back in the 90s. And if you look at by decade or by century, it shows from 1800 to 1900 to 2000. Like in 1800, it was like mostly it wasn't the whole world. Anyway, I'm not seeing anything that's kind of giving that. Let me see what this one is here. Where'd it go? I saw something. Okay, let me see what this takes me to. Unreached people groups. View page. I don't want to just view the image. I want to view the page. Oops. Let's see. But by the end of the 20th century, it had pretty much reached just about every tribe, tongue, and nation in the world. Let me see what this one says. Unreached people groups over 1 million. Is that talking about like, where am I? Anyway, I don't know if this is what I'm looking for. Anyway, if you look at unreached people groups or reached people groups where churches were planted in 1900 versus 2000, it's like night and day. And by 2000, most of the world had been reached and churches had been planted. And that was the last time I saw that was like 30 years ago. So I can only imagine how close we are to literally reaching every tribe, tongue, and nation now. And so I just wanted to point that out, how both sides would see it. So anyway, okay. But to me, this is one of those verse 14 is one of those signs that we are close. And this gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. Okay, abomination of desolation, verse 15. So when you see the abomination of desolation, I'm going to write this here. Okay. I'm going to put in parentheses, standing in the holy place, because I want to get, now the holy place is a place in the tabernacle. So a lot of times we don't understand, like we have to think about the whole scripture, right? In the tabernacle, there's the holy place. Okay. Where was I? Oh, verse 15. Let the reader understand. Now, it refers to Daniel, and we will do Daniel at some point. We've already looked at like the kingdoms and stuff, but there's other chapters in Daniel that are applicable, and I wanted to do that. And one of them talks about the abomination of desolation as well. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Now, I will say this. A lot of people, like, okay, if you believe in a first century fulfillment, you could say that, first of all, it says Judea, which is what it was called at the time. And this could be referring to when the temple was destroyed in the first century. It could also be a double fulfillment, or it could have just been fulfilled then, or it's all talking about the future. I don't know. Now, one of the questions they asked was, when will these things be, referring to the tabernacle being destroyed, or or you know. And so is abomination of desolation, if it's in the holy place and it's about to be laid desolate, that could be what that's talking about. So a lot of people believe that in 70 AD, under Domitian, I believe, is the abomination of desolation. On the other hand, there was another event before Christ under Antiochus Epiphanes. Real quick, I want to look at Antiochus. See if I write the Antiochus Epiphanes. There it is. Let's put pig sacrifice. Now, here, this has got to us. Antiochus called himself Epiphanes. He set up an altar to Zeus over the altar of burnt offering, and he sacrificed a pig on the altar, which is an abomination, right? Where did that go? But then Jesus says, when you see it, saying that it will happen again in the future. So the point I'm trying to make is that there could be multiple abominations of desolations like this. So is it possible, if another temple is built in the future, that an abomination of desolation could take place again? And so I just want to be open to that, and also consider that, yes, there could be that first century fulfillment. Spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. Verse 16, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let the one who is on the housetop not go down to take what is in his house, and let the one who is in the field not turn back to take his cloak. And alas, for women who are pregnant and for those who are nursing infants in those days, pray that your flight may not be in winter or on a Sabbath. For then there will be great tribulation, such as, okay, next thing, great tribulation, unlike before or after. This is, I believe, the great tribulation. Okay. Now, is this talking about 70 AD? Was it the greatest tribulation of all time? Was it worse? Now, I've thought about this because I kind of think that based upon what we know in history, that what happened in Egypt was worse when the plagues were sent and Israel was there, and then God delivered his people through the Red Sea, right? But is this talking about the greatest tribulation just in Jerusalem, or is it talking about the whole world? Well, what does it say? For then there will be great tribulation, such as has not been from the beginning of the world until now, no, nor ever will be. So even in the future, there won't be anything this bad. And if those days had not been cut short, no human being would be saved. I suppose you could look at that from a first century fulfillment perspective and say Christianity was on shaky ground in the early days because it had just started and there was persecution. And yet it survived that. Now, I would say if you're going to take that approach, Christianity grew through the persecution. So it wasn't like it was on shaky ground to stop if it continued, because it actually went on for 400 years, not just 40 years, because the Romans continued persecuting Christians for hundreds of years after Jerusalem was sacked by Domitian, if I'm pronouncing that Caesar correctly. Okay, where was I? Pray that your flight, there will be great tribulation such as has not been from the beginning. Now, understand it says, for then there will be great tribulation. Seems to be right after this thing called the abomination of desolation. So my understanding is that whenever this abomination of desolation took place or takes place, that it's followed by the Great Tribulation. Excuse me. And the question is, if it was a first century fulfillment, when did this Great Tribulation end? And when you talk about like persecution, now it may not just be referring to that, but the persecution did not stop in 70 AD. It just came from different leaders. It didn't come from Jerusalem anymore. So from a futurist perspective, we would believe that, yes, in the future, there's going to be an abomination of desolation, and that's going to be followed by the Great Tribulation. And there will be a global system that will persecute Christians in the future. That was what futurists believe. Now, notice for all futurists, there are pre-trib, mid-trib, or pre-wrath, and post-trib. Up until this point, there has been no indication of a rapture. And so I wanted to point that out. Now, some believe that this is only written to the Jews, Matthew, so it's not mentioned. And we'll look at the other two, Mark and Luke, and see if they give any indication of a rapture before this. But so far, nothing has been stated, at least in this chapter. Verse 23. Then if anyone says to you, look, here is the Christ, or there he is, do not believe it. For false Christ and false prophet will arise. So, false Christ and false prophets. And this seems to be either during the Great Tribulation or so far we've heard about the abomination of desolation and the Great Tribulation. And it says, then if anyone looks at you and says, look, here is the Christ, or there he is, do not believe it. So if there was already a rapture before this, that seems a little strange to me. That they're still looking for the coming Christ, right? Now, if you're talking about the first century, it is very possible that there were people that were claiming to be, because I'm sure that many of them were expecting Christ to return then in their generation. And I'll get to some of that, some verses that say this generation and how I view that. But, okay, where are my false Christs? And false prophets will arise and perform great signs and wonders. So great signs and wonders. This is important, I believe, because this is mentioned elsewhere as well. And I don't know that we're seeing that now, because on TBN there are false prophets and fake miracle workers, but they're not really that amazing, if you ask me, unless you're gullible. I'm not saying that there aren't real miracles. Okay, don't accuse me of saying that. What I'm saying is there are many fake ones, and I think any discerning Christian would agree that there are fake miracle workers out there doing it for profit, for money. It says, so to be led astray, if possible, even the elect. So it's going to be a mass deception that, if possible, even the elect could be deceived, which means that there will be people that are capable of being deceived because it's such a mass deception, but God will protect them from that. Now, those who believe in a pre-trib rapture believe that the elect here are only referring to the Jews. But again, there's no indication of that. For those who are partial preterists, if you're post-mill, on-mill, or full preterist, I think they would say, no, the rapture has not happened, or no, this coming of Christ, the way they understand it, has not yet happened. That nobody's been taken up to heaven, so to speak, up until this point. For the futurists, many believe that it has already happened. It just wasn't mentioned anywhere in this chapter so far. Now, maybe somebody will point out to me somewhere that they believe indicates that is the case. And I'm not saying that's why we're going to be looking at other books and things, because of I want to get the parallels. I want to see. Hello, Darla. Just acknowledging that you are here, and good to see you. Okay. So what I'm saying is that at least in this chapter, it's not mentioned. It doesn't mean that it's not mentioned elsewhere prior to a great tribulation or something. So I just wanted to state that, and we're just taking one at a time. And this is not conclusive. That's why we have to look at all other scripture and passages. But up until now, there's nothing that indicates any kind of rapture in this chapter. Verse 25, see, I have told you beforehand. So if they say to you, look, he is in the wilderness, do not go out. If they say, look, he is in the inner rooms, do not believe it. For as the lightning comes from the east and shines as far as the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Now, I do know, for those who hold a future pre-trib rapture view, would say that the second coming is separate from the rapture, so that a lot of them, or even wrath and mid-trib, also believe those are two separate events. So apparently there's a rapture, and then at the end of the tribulation, Christ returns with his saints. So that's how they understand it. And yeah, so anyway, so I just wanted to make sure that people know that I understand that perspective. Okay, so we're going to keep going. And now it's saying what it will look like when Christ returns. As lightning comes from the east and shines as far as the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Wherever the corpse is, where the vultures will gather. That's kind of interesting. I never really put much thought into that. But as I did a whole series on once to die and then the judgment, that verse seems very similar to, for example, Revelation 14:11 or Revelation 19, when Christ is in the air and a great army with him, and all the armies of the earth aim their weapons at him, and fire comes out of heaven and destroys them, right? I think that's what it's referring to there. Where the corpse is, there the vulture will gather. On the other hand, some may say this is referring to 70 AD when Jerusalem was sacked by the Romans. Okay, verse 29. Now this is the verse, the passage. Notice we were just talking about the Great Tribulation. This is where I became convinced. Now, up until that point, this was about 25 years ago, because I listened. I was fascinated with end times back in the 90s. I was taught pre-trib rapture, futurist pre-trib rapture, like most people are, like Left Behind, the movie Left Behind, and a lot of books have been written, and most seem to be futurist pre-trib rapture view. And that's what I was taught, and I didn't really think there was any clear scripture. I assumed that, but I also heard people believe in a post-trib, but I didn't have any way of refuting it because I hadn't really studied the matter. Well, I listened to a guy named Irving Baxter who had a series called End Time, or I think that's what it was called, End Time Ministries or something like that. He had a lot of things that I don't agree with, but he was the one that pointed this passage out on his radio show. Verse 29, let's read it. Immediately after the tribulation of those days. So let me write this in. After the tribulation. And what is the tribulation of those days? Well, it just said the greatest tribulation, unlike before or after. And I believe that is the great tribulation. Moon darkened. The moon will be darkened. Let's see. I want to make sure I'm reading it directly. Moon will not give the sun will be darkened. Sun darkened. Moon. Let me just put sun and moon darkened, because that's basically what it says. Stars fall from heaven. And the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Powers of heaven shaken. Then will appear in heaven the sign of the Son of Man, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn. So, Son of Man appears in heaven. All the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send out his angels with a loud trumpet call. There's a parallel passage to this. So I'm going to write down trumpet call. We'll get to that at some point. So trumpet call, gather, elect. Now I'm going to type all this out for the next one. I'm just trying to do quick notes as I go. Gather elect from four winds. Now, those who believe in a pre-trib or pre-wrath rapture, well, actually, pre-wrath might say this is, but they would say that okay, I've heard people say there's the great tribulation and then the wrath of God. So that would be the way that a pre-wrath or mid-trib might look at this, is say it's after the great tribulation, but before the wrath of God. So that would be a pre-wrath view, I think. This is how I've heard it explained. So they would not say this is the second coming. They would say this is the rapture, but it's after the great tribulation, before the wrath of God. I think. So that's probably how they would understand. Now, pre-trib rapture would say this is the second coming and not the rapture. So that some rapture event happened before that wasn't mentioned in this chapter, and now you have the second coming, and that the elect that are being gathered is just the Jews. I think that's what they would say. That's what I've heard them say. I believe that this is the second coming and the rapture at the same time. That it sounds like the rapture with the gathering of the elect from the four winds. So that's my understanding. And with the trumpet call, which is key because that's going to be mentioned elsewhere, which many agree that is the rapture. I think it's in 2 Thessalonians. We'll look at that at some point. But we're focused on this Olivet Discourse. They will gather his elect from four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. Now, here's how a partial preterist or post-mill, on-mill would view this. Now, the full preterists believe that Christ already came, and they still hold this pre-mill. Most of the ones I've heard, they're pre-mill preterists, meaning that Christ came already, and they believe the second coming already happened. I'm talking more about a-mill and post-mill, and hopefully I'm not confusing you too much, that believe Christ will return at the end of this church age, which they call the millennium, that the Great Tribulation happened in the first century. So how do they explain this? Where it says the sign of the Son of Man, well, let's start with the days, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light and the stars will fall from heaven. The way I've heard that explained is that all symbolizes Israel because of Joseph's dream where the sun, the moon, and the stars bowed to him. That was his family, so Israel. And so when Jerusalem was sacked, that this is what they say it's referring to. So I could not necessarily refute that, and I think that's a possible way of understanding it. Personally, I think this will happen literally in some magnificent way when Christ returns. But I just wanted to acknowledge that possible way of understanding this. And then it says, then will appear in heaven the sign of the Son of Man, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send out his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to another. So there's the gathering of the elect, right? Now, how do they understand this? Those who believe in a first century fulfillment would say that this is all symbolic language of 70 AD, that it's basically like in the Old Testament, there's wordage like God coming in judgment. So they would say that the Son of Man came in judgment against Israel or Judea in 70 AD, and that's when they were no longer a nation. I'm not sure about that. This sounds to me like the second coming. It sounds like the rapture. That's just me. But so I just wanted to mention all that. Now, verse 32. From the fig tree, learn its lesson. As soon as its branches become tender and puts out its leaves, you know that summer is near. So also, when you see all these things, you know that he is near at the very gates. Now, those who are partial preterists or preterists use this as a proof text, verse 34. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass until all these things take place. And I want to pause here and say this to them means that to the audience he's speaking to, all these things will take place in their generation. I think that there's a very easy way of understanding this another way, and that is to say that the context of this verse is to learn the lesson of its fig tree. As soon as its branch becomes tender and puts out its leaves, you know that summer is near. So also when you see these things, you know that he is near and at the very gates. So what things? All these things we were talking about. So when I see verse 34, my thinking is when you see these things take place, the generation will not pass until all these things take place. So I believe that is the context of verse 34. But I understand the point made by those who believe in a first century fulfillment of all these things that we've mentioned so far. However, the next verse says, heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. Heaven and earth has not passed away yet. That did not happen in the first century. But I don't think it will happen at the second coming of Christ either. So, and there's other reasons for that. But so let's keep reading. Concerning the day and hour, no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but the Father only. So a lot of pre-trib rapture believers would say that that this proves a pre-trib rapture because no one knows the day or the hour, not even the angel of heaven nor the Son, but the Father only. However, I think that the next verses can still be compatible with a post-trib rapture. Now, the pre-wrath, same thing. You don't know exactly when in the time frame that happens. So day or hour doesn't necessarily mean we can't know the season. And I know that based upon these next verses. For as were the days of Noah, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. For as in those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and given in marriage, until the day when Noah entered the ark. And they were unaware until the flood came and swept them all away. So will be the coming of the Son of Man. Excuse me. So verse 40, then 2 men will be in the field, one will be taken and one left. 2 women will be grinding at the mill, one will be taken and one left. Therefore stay awake, for you do not know on what day your Lord is coming. But know this, that if the master of the house had known in what part of the night the thief was coming, he would not stay awake and would not have let his house be broken into. Therefore you also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect. So now I'm not exactly sure what partial preterists would view on this. I've heard some people say that being taken was not a good thing. But in the context of the previous verses of God, Jesus will gather together his elect, and also, I guess in the flood, it could mean that those who were not in the ark were taken away. It says they were unaware until the flood came and swept them all away. So maybe most people who believe in a future rapture would say the ones taken away are the raptured ones. I'm trying to see if there's anything in here, because I like to think through this and not just assume. Is there anything in here that indicates that it's good to be taken away? Like if it's talking about the rapture, that would be a good thing, right? If it's talking about something else, maybe it's better not to be taken away. It does compare being taken away to like a thief that's coming. But that could be more about being prepared and being ready than it is about this event. But I'm trying to see if it clarifies anything, whether this is talking about whether it's good to be taken away or not. But know this, that if the master of the house had known in what part of the night the thief was coming, he would have stayed awake and would not have let his house be broken into. Therefore, you also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect. I can understand, I guess, as I'm trying to think about this from a perspective of it not being good to be taken away. I can understand how you must, let's see, how this could also be referring to some first century, like the wrath of or the Son of Man coming in judgment against the people that rejected him as the Messiah, as Israel, the nation, or the Judea, the nation. So if you take that perspective, you could say that they were not ready, that those who were in Christ, I don't know how much Christians were affected by this, if they fled to the mountains and were not there when this happened. But many of them still were killed somewhere else. So I don't know if that makes sense or not. I'm trying to think about it. This is one of those things where I would say find somebody who teaches Amill or Post-Mill and listen to how they would, and ask, or find a video or asks one of them how they would understand these verses, how they would explain these verses from a first century fulfillment perspective. Most futurists believe this is all referring to the rapture. And so I just want to point out real quickly, the day and the hour no one knows. That's in verse 36. From a pre-trib rapture, they would say that proves a pre-trib rapture because it happens at any time. It could happen anytime. If it's the end of the tribulation, people would say, then you would know when it was happening. I would say you still don't know the day or the hour. It doesn't mean you won't know the general season based upon what has happened before. Just like it says, stay awake, for you do not know on what day your Lord is coming. Let's see. Okay, I think we can keep reading because I think there's something that I'm looking for that's probably we haven't gotten to yet. Verse 45, who then is the faithful and wise servant whom his master has set over his household to give them their food at the proper time? Blessed is the servant whom his master will find so doing when he comes. So these are people that are ready, that are at least, this doesn't necessarily mean they know, but they're prepared, right? Truly I say to you, he will set him over all his possessions. But if that wicked servant says to himself, my master is delayed, and begins to beat his fellow servants and eats and drinks with drunkards, the master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, and at an hour he does not know, and will cut him in pieces and put him with the hypocrites. In that day there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So now you have this phrase, and we've been doing on the series Once to Die and Then the Judgment. I've done videos on my views on hell and all that stuff. This seems to put a timestamp towards a final judgment. That phrase is when people are cast in the lake of fire, I believe. But let's see. The master will cut him in pieces and put him with the hypocrites. In that place will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And I'm not sure if that's Hades or Gehenna in this context. It doesn't really mention any kind of hell here, but it could just mean that they will be set forth for this judgment where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So I need another sheet of paper because I'm running out of space here for Matthew. And I'm kind of wondering if I may edit the title. Actually, I didn't put Matthew 25, so I think I will stop at Matthew 24 and then look at the parallel passages. Now, these should go much quicker because they're parallel passages. Matthew 25 continues this sermon, so I may go back to that later, but Mark 13. So this is a parallel passage, and I'm going to mark off the similarities and differences here. And as he came out of the temple, one of his disciples said to him, "Look, teacher, what wonderful stones and what wonderful buildings." And Jesus said to him, "Do you see these great buildings? There will not be left here one stone upon another." Now, this is similar. Before it's, they asked about the temple, right? So one of them, I think it's the same thing. It's the same idea. So here it's the buildings of the temple. Okay. So it's plural, buildings of the temple. And now here in Mark 13, it just says buildings. So I'm assuming that is a parallel question or comment that they made. And Jesus said to him, do you see these great buildings? There will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down. Same thing he said in Matthew 24. So it's worded a little differently. Actually, it does say came out of the temple, but then it just says buildings here. But anyway, it's the same idea. It's just worded differently. And as he sat on the Mount of Olives opposite, this is why it's called the Olivet Discourse, because he said this on the Mount of Olives. Opposite the temple, Peter and James and John and Andrew asked him privately, "Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign when all of these things are about to be accomplished?" Now, in this wording, it's kind of all clumped together. So now this does not necessarily mean that they're assuming that maybe the disciples are assuming it's all at the same time. Now they don't really, let's see, when will this sign, when all these things, now in this one, it doesn't say anything about the sign of your coming and the end of the age isn't mentioned here. It's just kind of like, when will these things be and what will be the sign? When all these things, what are all these things? The things Jesus just mentioned. But this question doesn't refer to his coming and the end of the age. It's the same idea, but it's kind of summarized a different way by Mark. And Jesus began to say to them, "See that no one leads you astray. Many will come in my name, saying, 'I am he,' and will lead many astray." So that's a check mark there. It's the same, pretty much the same wording there. Many will come in my name, saying, 'I am he.'" And verse 7, "And when you hear of wars and rumors of wars, do not be alarmed. This must take place, but the end is not yet." So exactly the next thing that was said in Matthew 24. And when you, let's see, this verse 8, "For nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes in various places." So this is parallel, nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom, famines and earthquakes in diverse places. exactly what it was in Matthew 24. But these are the beginnings of the birth pains. So once again, birth pains, same thing. Be on your guard. And let's see, be on your guard. That's similar to what it said over here. Let's see, what does it say here? And the gospel, let's see. Be on your guard. Or well, I'm trying to see if there's a parallel to that. But anyway, this is right after the birth pains. Okay. Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and put you to death. So this one doesn't say be on your guard after the birth pains. Mark 13, right after the birth pains, it says be on your guard. So that's a little different, at least in the order. For they will deliver you over to councils. Now this is similar to deliver you to tribulation and put you to death, is what it said in Matthew 24. They will deliver you over to councils and will be beaten in synagogues, which seems to indicate Jewish temples. Now, one thing to realize is that there were Jewish temples all throughout, like in Turkey, and like, because Paul was preaching to synagogues too, like that were not in Judea. And so this is referring more specifically to Jewish leaders that were persecuting Christians. Whereas in Matthew 24, I don't think it makes that. Let's see. You'll be hated by all nations for my name's. Now here it says all nations. Here it says by the synagogues, beaten in the synagogues. You will stand before governors and kings. So this is, to me, that seems to indicate more than just Judea, that it includes Roman governors and kings, and even throughout the church age. But I'm going to put synagogues here and governors and kings, because that wording is a little different. But from a a-mill, post-mill perspective, that seems, now the synagogues part, you could say that's just in Judea, but governors and kings, I suppose that there were more than one governor in Judea and more than one king in Judea from 30 to 70 AD as well. I'm just trying to consider it as I'm reading it. But when I look at it, I think synagogues throughout the world continuing to this day, although synagogues haven't been persecuting Christians as much since 70 AD, but governors and kings throughout the world have, throughout the church age, not so much in the West, but and then it says, for my name's sake, to bear witness before them all, or before them. And the gospel must first be proclaimed to all nations. That's parallel there. Now, did it miss something? Let's see. Endures the end. Okay, so there's a few things here that were skipped over that were in Matthew. Hated by all nations. Let's see. Many will fall away and betray and hate one another. False prophets, lawlessness increase. Love of many will grow cold. Endures to the end will be saved. And then it just skips over to the gospel will be proclaimed to all nations. And that when they bring you to trial and deliver you over, do not be anxious beforehand what you will say. Now, I don't think this was in, but say whatever is given to you in the hour, for it is not you who speak, but the Holy Spirit. I don't think that was in Matthew 24. Oh, wait, that is Matthew 24, right? hold on. Okay, do not be anxious. That's verse 11. This is right after the gospel proclaimed to all nations. Now let's go back here and see, because I don't remember that phrase. The gospel, okay, here it is. And the gospel, the kingdom will be proclaimed to all nations, to a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. Then it goes straight to the abomination. So I don't see anything that mentions do not be anxious about what you say. So that is something different here. That is something that wasn't there. I'm going to go ahead and put that in. Do not be Holy Spirit will lead in what you say. Okay. I'm putting this down. I'm not really sure if there will be something, but I just wanted to point out the difference and write that down. Verse 12, and brother will deliver brother over to death, and the father his child, and children will rise against parents and have them put to death. Now that's worded a little differently. Let's see what the parallel is. It might just be in a different order, because that seems more like what it was talking about earlier, where many fall away and betray and hate one another. It's given a little different wording, but it's kind of flipped over. So I'm going to put the parallel here is verse 12. But now it says family and friends. I'm just going to summarize it as family and friends. Let's see. Will hate. Let's see. Have them put to death. So you'll have family and friends that will give you over to persecution. Now, yes, this happened in the first century. As well. Okay. And now it says, but the one who endures to the end will be saved. So that's verse 13. Hated by all for my name's sake. That was also here somewhere. I may not have written that exactly, but I know that was also in there. Okay, abomination. But when you see the abomination of desolation standing where he ought not to be, so now it says standing where he ought not. So where is this? Abomination of desolation. Check. Standing where he ought not. So that wording is a little different than in the holy place. But we can probably define this through Matthew 24, because here it's not very specific, right? But in the Levitical law, no one except priests are supposed to go into the holy place, right? Let's see. Okay. Let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let the one who is in the housetop not go down, nor enter his house to take anything out. And so that was Judea flee to the mountains. Check. Okay. And alas, for women who are pregnant and for those who are nursing infants in those days, pray that it may not happen in winter. For in those days there will be such tribulation as has not been from the beginning of the creation that God created until now, and never will be. So now we've got the Great Tribulation. I know the wording is different, but I don't think there's anything that important to write down that's different wording. Okay, let me check these comments. Magnitude 7.7 earthquake in Thailand. Thank you for that. Howdy, folks. Hi, Jason. And thank you, Rob. My company is here. Okay. Well, thank you for listening and so far. And yeah, if you want to watch it later, that would be great. Okay. Let's see. Be on guard. Let's see. I've told you these. Oh, wait. Did I skip something here? For such, let's see, verse 20. And if the Lord had not cut short the days, no human being would be saved. For the sake of the elect, whom he chose, he shortened the days. Right? So I think that's a parallel to great signs and, let's see, great tribulation, unlike before and after. I don't think there's anything in there I need to write down. It's a little different wording, but that's okay. Verse 21. And then if anyone says to you, look, here's the Christ, or look, here he is, do not believe it. For false Christs and false prophets will arise and perform signs and wonders to lead astray, if possible, the elect. Same wording as Matthew 24. I'm going to check that off. And that was right after the abomination, I believe, or the Great Tribulation. For false Christs and false prophets will arise and perform signs and wonders and lead astray, if possible, the elect. But be on guard. I have told you all these things beforehand. So once again, that's parallel to false Christ, to be on guard. Okay. Then another parallel, verse 24. But in those days, after that tribulation, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. So that's parallel as well. And the stars will be falling from heaven, and the powers in the heavens will be shaken. And then they will see the sign, or they will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power and glory. And then he will send out the angels and gather his elect from the four winds, from the ends of the earth to the ends of heaven. Now, this passage here, when it says, for those who believe in a first century fulfillment, it's hard to understand how it's just talking about Judea when it says he will gather them from the ends of the earth to the ends of heaven. That seems more like a worldwide thing, right? But that is parallel to Matthew 24 as well. And then we get the fig tree. From the fig tree, learn its lesson. As soon as its branch becomes tender and puts out its leaves, you know that summer is near. So also, when you see these things taking place, you know that he is near, at the very gates. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. That's exactly like Matthew 24, so I'm not going to elaborate on that, but that's also a parallel. Let's go ahead and finish the chapter here. But concerning that day or that hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. Be on guard, keep awake, for you do not know when the time will come. It is like a man going on a journey, when he leaves home and puts his servants in charge, each with his work, and with commands the doorkeeper to stay awake. Therefore stay awake, for you do not know when the master of the house will come, in the evening, or at midnight, or when the rooster crows, or in the morning, lest he come suddenly and find you asleep. And what I say to you, I say to all, stay awake. So different wording, but nothing in there that gives anything different than Matthew 24. There was a couple of places that were different, a little more information. And the last chapter, Luke 21, We'll go through this. Jesus looked up and saw the rich. Let's see, maybe it doesn't start there. Okay, let's start in verse 5. And while some were speaking of the temple, how it was adorned with noble stones and offerings, he said, as for those things that you see, the day will come when there will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down. And they asked him, Teacher, when will these things be, and what will be the sign when these things are about to take place? So the way they questioned it here, the way it's worded here, is similar to Mark 13. As I noted in Matthew 24, it sounded like it could possibly be three separate questions. When will these things be, referring to the temple? What will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age? So that's what's asked in Matthew. But Mark and Luke seem to kind of lump it all together, which could be an assumption on the disciples' part. It doesn't necessarily mean they all happen together. And he said, see that you are not led astray, for many will come in my name, saying, I am he, and that the time is at hand. Do not go after them. So that's a check. Now it does say the time is at hand. That's a little different wording. It's almost like people prophesying that Jesus is about to return. Now, because that's a little different, I'm going to go ahead and comment on that. Every year, there are books written or documentaries written about how Jesus is about to come back. Sometimes they're prophecies, right? Right now, I've been hearing a lot of stuff about the next month from Jonathan Cahn and others like that. So, it's kind of funny when I think about the time is at hand. Now, I do believe we're close, but I want to say that there's always been books and things written and people saying that because of the blood moons or something that it's about to happen. But anyway, let's continue. Where was I? I am he, and the time is at hand. Do not go after them. And when you hear of wars and tumults, so rumors of wars, I'm not sure what tumults means. Let me look it up real quick because I want to know. A loud, confused noise, especially one caused by a large mass of people. Interesting. So in Matthew and Mark, it says wars and rumors of wars. Here it says tumults. I guess loud noise from people, meaning people are talking about it. Do not be terrified, for these things must first take place, but the end will not end, or the end will not be at once. Interesting, at once. I don't know what that means. Or the others say end is not yet. I'm going to put at once here for that because I want to see if there's any clarification there for that. Verse 10, then he said to them, nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be great earthquakes and in various places famines and pestilences, and there will be terrors and great signs from heaven. So that's all. Nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom, check. Famines and earthquakes, check. Terrors and great signs from heaven, verse 12. But before all this, they will lay their hands on you and persecute you, delivering you up to the synagogues and prisons. Deliver you to tribulation, synagogues, governors. So that's parallel to that. I don't think there's any wording in here that clarifies or gives any additional information. Where was I? Sorry, I keep losing my place. But before all this, they will lay hands. Let's see. Verse, and you will be brought before kings and governors for my name's sake. Verse 13. This will be your opportunity to bear witness. Settle in, therefore, in your minds, not to meditate beforehand how to answer. For I will give you a mouth and wisdom which none of your adversaries will be able to withstand or contradict. I'm going to parallel this with, this is in Mark and not in Matthew. So anyway, that we've already talked about that. There's nothing additional here. Verse 15. For I will give you a mouth and wisdom which none of your adversaries will be able to withstand or contradict. You will be delivered up even by parents and brothers and relatives and friends, and some of you they will put to death. So that's a parallel to verse 12 in Mark 13. And I'm going to have all this typed out at the beginning of the next video, but this is how I chose to do it. Maybe I'll have it all typed out before the next one. I don't know. I mean, the next one, the book I look at, I don't know. But I like to sometimes show you my process live. That's why I do it this way, or chose to. Because sometimes you'll see me actually learn as I go. I actually learn something when I do this, even though I've studied this before. But verse 16, you will be delivered up even by parents and brothers and relatives and friends, and some of you will be put to death. 17, you will be hated by all for my name's sake, but not a hair of your head will perish, but your indulgence will gain your lives. Now that 18 and 19 there is not in either of the previous. So we just talked about delivered by parents, hated by all. Let's see. Yes. So I'm going to put this here in Luke 21 in parentheses. Hair not perish, and endurance gain lives. I'm not exactly sure what that that's an interesting phrase there, but not a hair of your head will perish, which I guess for me, it's too late for that. Your endurance will gain your lives. Well, I guess your eternal life, right? Oh, you know what? That's parallel to endures to the end will be saved. It's just worded so weirdly and differently. So that is actually compatible or a parallel to he who endures to the end will be saved. Real quickly, I want to see if it let's see, endures to the end. Okay. The love of many will grow cold. Okay, so it doesn't say anything about the head on the hair on the head. Verse 20, but when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies. Now, this is interesting. This could be more direct towards like how the partial preterist or amill, postmill would understand it. When you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then know that its desolation has come near. That was true in 70 AD. The question is, will it happen again? I don't know. So I have to keep both in mind when we think about these things. So Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then you know its desolation has come near. So before, actually, the wording was, when you see the abomination of desolation. Let's see, where's abomination? So Jerusalem surrounded. This is a parallel to that. So is that actually what the abomination of desolation is when Jerusalem is surrounded by armies? I don't know, but it's kind of like the parallel to the same idea that in Matthew 24 and Mark 13, it says the abomination of desolation. So here it uses the phrase Jerusalem surrounded by armies. So now that's happened multiple times before this, Babylon, the Assyrians, the Persians, and the Greeks, the Romans, they've also, and so this could happen again. But I can also understand a first century fulfillment of this. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let those who are in the city depart, and let those who are out in the country, let not those who are out in the country enter it. So this is parallel to that, although that phrase, I don't think it's that important to include those who are not in it. Let them not enter. For those, these are the days of vengeance to fulfill all that is written. The days, I'm trying to think, is that, I think it says something like all these things must take place, right? Let's see what, because that's worded a lot differently there. And so after the abomination of desolation, you have I guess that's similar. Those who are in the field not turn back to take his cloak, so not come back. And the other one, it says, let those who are out in the field not come in. Where does it say something about these things must take place? Anyway, I don't know. So let's see, I've told you beforehand. Look in the wilderness, do not go. Okay, well, I don't know. That's a phrase that is a little different, where it says, where was I? I'm doing this in a unproductive way, but maybe I won't do it this way again. To fulfill all that is written. Let's see, these are the days of vengeance. The days of vengeance. I'm going to go ahead and write that in here because that's a little different wording. Okay, days of vengeance. And must, let's see, fulfill what has been written. Fulfill what is written. And I'm going to put the verse here because what I'm trying to do is not assume. I want to see what parallels we find when I go to Revelation, when I go to Ezekiel, Daniel, etc., Zephaniah, which is why I'm putting all this here. This is verse 22, right? Verse 23, alas for women who are pregnant and for those who are nursing infants in those days, for there will be great distress upon the earth and wrath against his people. So I think this is parallel of great tribulation. Seems to be, sometimes these aren't in the same order, which is interesting. So great distress, great tribulation. I'm not going to necessarily write the difference of that down because that's the same thing. It's a synonym. Against this people. Now here it says this people, which could just mean, it could mean the Jewish people, or it could mean the Christians. They will fall by the edge of the sword and be led captive among all nations. And Jerusalem will be trampled underfoot by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. So the way it's worded here sounds more like a first century fulfillment. I'm just being honest, in the sense that the way it's worded. They will fall by the edge of the sword and be led captive among. Now, it says they and not you in this. So this is verse 24. Let's see here. Okay. I want to write something here down because Jerusalem trampled, and yeah, underfoot by Gentiles until times of Gentiles. Until Gentiles. Now, I think that phrase, I don't know. It seems like I've read until Gentiles are fulfilled in other places. And so I wanted to write that down. That's verse 24, right? Yeah, I want to write that down because that's a little different than what I've read in the others. And this seems to be more, could be more understood as 70 AD here. But yeah, I'm just trying to think about it from both angles. But then again, I do believe that the abomination of desolation in the future will also be in Jerusalem, and there will be a desolation that takes place there as well. So anyway, just wanted to point that out. And there will be signs in the sun and moon and stars, and all the earth distress of nations and perplexity because of the roaring of the sea and the waves. Now, this is worded differently. People fainting in fear, with fear and with foreboding of what is coming on the world. For the powers of the heavens will be shaken, and then we'll see the sign. We'll see the Son of Man coming in the cloud with power and glory. Now that part there is the same, but I just wanted to include this earth distress and of nations. I'm just going to put verse 25 here, and I can roaring because I want to put this on typed out later. So, okay. And then they will see the Son of Man coming in clouds with power and great glory. Now, when these things begin to take place, straighten up and raise your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. I assume when it says, when you see these things begin to take place, is talking about all the things before the sign of Son of Man coming in the clouds. Now, if you're talking about a first century fulfillment here, if there is one, then it seems odd, because after Jerusalem was sacked, it wasn't like, now you could say they were delivered from the Jewish leaders, but for centuries they were still persecuted by the Romans. So I don't know if their redemption happened in 70 AD for believers. So that's just one thing to consider from a futurist perspective, that we would say that redemption is when Christ returns. Okay, and he told them a parable. Look at the fig tree. Let's see, was there any parallels here? Yeah, that's then we get into this parable of the fig tree, which we've as soon as they come out in leaf, you see for yourselves and know that the summer is already near. So also, when you see these things taking place, you know that the kingdom of God is near. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all has taken place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. There's nothing no additional information there from the previous. But watch yourselves, lest your hearts be weighed down with this dissipation and drunkenness and cares of this life, and that day come upon you suddenly like a trap. For it will come upon you who dwell on the face of the whole earth. So once again, not just in Judea or in the Roman, this says the face of the whole earth. But stay awake at all times, saying that you may have strength to escape all these things that are going to take place and to stand before the Son of Man. Now, some might say, from a pre-trib rapture perspective, this could be when they say, see, you'll escape all these things that are going to take place. Now, is this talking about the Great Tribulation, or is it talking about the wrath of God, or standing before the Son of Man at the final judgment? It could be talking about several things there. And then that's the end of his sermon. So I will leave it at that. Let me see if are any of you still here? If you want to come on, we can talk a little bit. Me bringing this passage up tonight. Let's see, you remember me? Okay. Let's see. How do I share this so that others can come on here? Oh, it's down here. Hide this. Okay. Invite. Okay. I wonder if I can put this on here. And if you're still here, hopefully that works, or do I need to send it somewhere else? So I'll give you a minute if you want to come on, if you're still here. And if not, I will end the stream. But I want to give you a minute. Let's see. I want to give a second to come on if you want to come on, and we can talk. Because you mentioned a couple of things here. Starting at the beginning of your stream, so my comments will be late. Okay, so you haven't gotten to this point yet. So I will end the stream here, and we can talk about it later. And we can talk later. So have a good day. And the next one, I believe, will be starting on the book of Revelation. And that might take several videos to get through. But what I want to do is not necessarily define everything, but show the order that things take place. Because now I want to focus on chronology and when things are happening. So, and look at parallel passages to get context and get some kind of order of things. So that's what I want to do next time. And it may take several videos to get through. So, all right. Thank you all and have a wonderful day.